when we use this word narcissistic, a deeply misunderstood word. Until you came to the various things you've read, maybe this YouTube channel, maybe other YouTube channels, books, articles, whatever, some of you may have actually thought narcissism means self-love. We now know it's the opposite. It's really self-loathing. We think that narcissists are confident. You now know it's not that. We know that they're very insecure and often plagued by self-loathing. The criteria for narcissistic personality disorder are all the things I've talked about. A pervasive pattern of grandiosity and validation seeking and envy of other people and the need to get special treatment and the need to be around people who are very important and on and on and on. But in order for it to be narcissistic personality disorder, you need two other things, or maybe one other thing. You either need to show that the person is experiencing significant, what we call clinical distress or significant distress, meaning that this pattern doesn't feel good to them. That makes more sense when we talk about something like depression. When a person meets the diagnostic criteria for depression, let me tell you this, they're really uncomfortable. They feel worthless, they feel sad, they can't sleep, they can't eat. It is an uncomfortable place, so they feel distressed. In most cases, narcissistic individuals walk around having all of these patterns and they're not really bothered by it. In fact, the only time they're bothered is when stuff in their life doesn't go their way, but that has nothing to do with their symptoms. The second piece we look for when we're deciding if somebody has narcissistic personality disorder is whether it's causing them something we call social and occupational impairment. Meaning, is it causing problems in their relationship? And is it causing problems in their jobs? Now here's the rub. If that narcissistic person is sitting in an office, they're going to say, yeah, no, I don't have any problems with these things. Now, for some reason, my partner seems to have a problem with me, or, you know, I keep doing really well at work, but everyone's got a problem with me. They tend to project it out. So they're not walking around thinking I'm having all these problems. Where it gets really tricky with books like the DSM is I, as a psychologist, can't diagnose someone if they're causing problems for someone else. So if I can see that the narcissist behavior is clearly causing difficulties for their wife or husband or kids or something, that doesn't qualify. It's got to be for the person. So you see how we get into this really dicey space. Narcissism is one of those patterns that actually often causes more discomfort for the people around the narcissist than for the narcissist themselves.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 for my top 10, top 10, 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Dr. Ramani Durvasula, and my take on her top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, get well versed with the 4 types.
I was shocked to find out that there is not just a blanket term, narcissism or narcissistic. There's actually 4 different categories for this. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, if you look at the research, and this is definitely, as I've gone over the years looking at what's been written, I really do think that 4 primary types have emerged. They're sort of our classical grandiose narcissists. That's sort of like the Chanel suit of narcissism. It's the classic representation of the person who's sort of very egotistical, arrogant, attention-seeking, validation-seeking. Look at me, I'm so great. Don't I have a beautiful house? They don't stop to listen to anybody. Again, your garden variety grandiose narcissist, okay? Far more problematic is the malignant narcissist. This is the person who is all the things the grandiose narcissist is, lacking empathy, entitled and grandiose and big and pompous, but they're also really mean. They will do really bad things. They almost feel like they're a little bit psychopathic. They often won't even feel that bad, maybe a little bit guilty, but not
Like,
really.
what do you mean they do bad things?
They will steal money from a company. They will cheat on their partner.
Oh, like really bad
like
things.
really bad things. Yeah, no. I'm not taking saying take more peppermints than they should from.
Yeah, that's
Hostess
kind of what I
stand.
was thinking.
No.
Yeah.
I'm talking like big ticket bad. And they'll lie, they cheat, they steal. These are your Bernie Madoff types. You know, like really malignant. They just sort of they make great criminals. You know, and again, when we can talk about it at some point, there's a difference between a psychopath and a narcissist. By and large, a narcissist, even a malignant narcissist, will feel a little bad about doing some things, especially feel bad if they've hurt other people in their circle. So if they do bad things, they'll be sorry they hurt their family, but they often won't really care about other victims, that kind of thing. So that's your malignant narcissist. Then there are some other types of narcissism that people don't realize and oh, that makes so much more sense. The key one in that one is called covert narcissism. Covert is a word that means secret, really. So a covert narcissist is somebody who is very sort of put upon by the world, but they're still grandiose. So they'll say things like, yeah, I'm a really great photographer, but the world never really noticed my greatness. I guess I just came up at the wrong time. And all these cameras you guys use now, it's easy now, but back when I was taking pictures, I could have been one of the great ones.
Is a
That's the
covert narcissist older?
They can be, but not necessarily.
Okay.
They often feel like life done them wrong. They can be quite passive aggressive. They're that person. They almost feel depressed. And in fact, more than a few of us will initially think the covert narcissist has depression and will treat them for depression. We're like, this is not getting better. And it has been 10 months. Even if they're on meds by now, something should have happened.
So someone who has been classified as a covert narcissist and then treated for depression will not show improvement.
If they're depressed, they'll show some improvement in their depression, but they'll still walk around like, woe is me. Why doesn't anyone see how great I am? I do so many great things for the world, and I guess it wasn't my time. And, and they'll be very vulnerable. If somebody says, they're very hypersensitive to criticism. So if somebody says, yeah, those pictures were good, but we're not going to be able to hang them up in our gallery. What? And they'll throw a tantrum. They'll become really cold. They'll become distant. No, I'm not coming to your gallery opening. My pictures weren't good enough for you. That's the covert narcissist.
Kind of like the I'm not fired, I quit.
Yes, exactly. They really do feel like the world never got their greatness.
Wow.
That's the covert narcissist.
Yeah, there's a lot of those in Los Angeles.
There's a lot of that. And then that often gets missed as, well, no, they're not even that confident. I'm like, no, listen. They really, it's always like, nobody gets how great I am. Fourth one is a fascinating one. I read an article about this and I was like, rarely do scientific articles get you as excited as I'm running around the university saying, you've got to read this.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
It's called the communal narcissist.
Communal.
The communal narcissist is that person, for example, all over their social media feed is like, off to feed the homeless today, but they're like really well made up, or like, it's Dog Rescue Thursday, and they're always out there trying to save the world. They go to galas and they go to benefits and they write big checks, but they need a lot of recognition. They need a lot of like, can we name this after you? Can we name that after you? And they walk around saying, look at all the good things I do. Like they'll have a website with them holding like children in impoverished regions of the world, but like they're always really well put together and they talk about it a lot. Like, look at my greatness. I'm all about giving back. And that's your communal narcissist, because what you will see is a tremendous lack of empathy for the so-called people they're trying to help. And in essence, sometimes even a grandiosity, like I'm above these things I'm rescuing, helping, give me so much recognition. And they seek a lot of validation for all their good works.
Oh, I know people watching right now are going, I know that person. I know that person.
Rule number 3, don't devalue yourself.
Narcissistic abuse is, or maybe we could call it, it's a syndrome looking for a name. And in fact, I don't, you know how we said we don't love the name borderline personality disorder? I actually kind of don't love the name narcissistic abuse. It's what everyone's using. Another thing we could probably call this is antagonal relational abuse, because I think that uses language that's more diagnostically familiar. But whatever you call it, this is a pattern and an experience a person has when they are in a relationship where they're with somebody who has a high conflict, rigid, antagonistic, entitled, egocentric, dysregulated style. Okay, so that's the nice way of saying all that without saying the word narcissist. And so it's a relationship that's characterized by dismissiveness, invalidation, manipulation like gaslighting, minimization, lots of entitlement, and lots of dysregulated rage. It's just a really uncomfortable space for a person. And over time, especially if a person doesn't understand what they're up against, because many people in these so-called narcissistic relationships blame themselves. They say, this is my fault, and maybe I need to do what they're saying. Maybe I'm not being nice enough. I'm not being intimate enough. I'm not being thin enough. I'm not being clean enough. I'm not being smart enough. I'm not being enough, whatever it is. And so the person exhausts themselves in an attempt to deliver on the impossible ask of the narcissist, right? And over time, people who are survivors of this experience have sort of a very specific set of psychological symptoms. The most central symptoms we see in people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse are patterns like confusion, diminished self-esteem, anxiety, some depressive symptoms, including sadness, sometimes even anger and irritability, lots of rumination, can't stop thinking about it because they can't fix it, and helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness. The symptoms go on a lot wider than that. And in fact, I tend to break the symptoms down into sort of 6 categories. There's all the sort of the patterns associated with changes in thinking in a survivor of narcissistic abuse. They ruminate a lot. There's a lot of regret. Again, that helplessness, the confusion. Some of them get caught up in this loop of perfectionism. If I could only get it just right, then I'll win the narcissist over. There's a lot of interpersonal stuff. People going through narcissistic abuse feel very lonely, because they feel as though nobody understands this sort of unique circumstance they're in. Because remember, narcissists often show a very sunny face to the world. So a lot of times people think that you're the luckiest person in the world to be in this relationship. They can also feel very socially isolated, as well as a lot of shame of how the heck did I get myself into this experience. There can be a lot of what we call symptoms of what I call symptoms of perception and arousal. They can be very hypervigilant, always walking on eggshells, always on edge. Am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to do the wrong thing? They can have difficulties with concentration. There are the symptoms around what we call self and identity. So these are things like a person has a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of self-devaluation. Like I said, real decrements in self-esteem. On the emotional front, all that depression, the anxiety, apathy, low energy, grief. And then in the physical and the health realm, because this does affect people's health, you'll see challenges with sleep. You'll see people will be reporting a lot more physical health issues. A lot of them are symptoms of stress and tension, headaches, muscle tension, but it is a lot of chronic stress. So you can sometimes see diminishments in immune function. So people may actually get sick more often, or it might make the existing illness like diabetes, for example, the course of that may become more problematic. People also don't take good care of themselves when they're in these relationships. You're devaluing yourself so much. You may not take your medications the right way. You may not exercise as much. You may not engage in a healthy diet. You may also use unhealthy coping, like using drugs and alcohol, smoking, spending money, things like that. And people with this pattern report a lot of fatigue. So you can see it takes in a lot of territory. And by and large, in the clients I work with who have this or experiencing this syndrome have symptoms in all 6 of those categories.
Rule number 4, manage first episodes of depression.
There's some people that actually believe that the onset of a first depressive episode, and that can be very reactive. Something happens in a person's world. They have a breakup, they lose their job, something goes wrong, and they have a depressive episode as a reaction to that. There's actually one hypothesis out there, the kindling hypothesis, that says that that first depressive episode almost sets up a kind of a sort of a a reset of neurotransmitters that makes a person more vulnerable to ongoing depressive episodes that would happen without a trigger, as though that first episode kind of booted the brain into sort of depression's an option kind of a place. And then the neurotransmitters came along for the ride, which is why those first episodes of depression are so important to prevent, and why things like stress management and all of those issues become so important, especially in adolescence, because that going into early adulthood is when we often see that first depressive episode.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, I've designed a special free training to help you do it. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a new habit. And I want that for you. I want you to build the habit of self-belief. So what I'm going to do is email you every day for 254 days a link to an unlisted video that will shift your belief forward. To get on it for free, the link to join is in the description below.
You were up and dressed and ready to go before your parents were up. You know why? Because you knew something unexpected was going to happen. That's how we should live our lives. Waking up with the understanding to expect the unexpected.
Successful people do what they hate to get to where they want to be.
If you didn't give a shit what anybody else thought, what's the thing you would love to be doing with your life?
Rule number 5, be vulnerable.
You really use the pronouns he, his, him a lot, okay? Are men more likely to be narcissists than women?
They are.
So why is that?
The statistics have always been very clear on that. It's much more prevalent in men. If I were to take all the narcissists in the world, my guess would be 80-20. Wow. That's changing. That's changing. Sad to say, this is one of those times women are going to break this glass ceiling, and they're catching
the
up.
narcissist glass ceiling.
Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely more men, and part of that is socialization. Men, even as boys, are not taught to talk about their emotions as much, to not be as tuned into that. Empathy, compassion, vulnerability, these things are not valued in boys, and they're not valued in men, and those are often the core of character. And so we tell boys, ignore those feelings, toughen up, and so that toughen upness can turn into things like a lack of empathy. And so men are also very measured on their achievements, being a provider, making lots of money, having a big title, having a big house. And so those kinds of drives, which are definitely pushed more for men, more valued in men, those are, again, are very superficial drives. And so as a result, they're going to be more manifested in men, which again can make that greater vulnerability to being more narcissistic. We just tolerate it more. If a woman behaves in a narcissistic way, she's often checked early in the game. Whereas if a boy or a man behaves that way, he's not called out.
Would you even say maybe they're applauded?
Oh, not only are they applauded, there are CEOs, there are world leaders, they are our celebrities, they are our athletes, they are our music stars. You better believe it. In fact, if I wrote a book on narcissism, it becomes a how-to guide for how to achieve in the New World Order.
Rule number 6, avoid upside down wins.
So self-sabotaging literally is what it sounds like. It's when a person literally undercuts their ability typically to achieve a goal. So, or an intention of any kind. It doesn't even have to be as aspirational as a goal. It's just even daily health habits, from getting a decent night's sleep to eating healthy to brushing their teeth. I mean, it can be any small health habits, big health habits. And they almost set things up in a way, not intentionally, but in a way that they're not even fully aware of, that all but guarantees a fail. And I always tell my clients that self-sabotage is a way to support your dysfunctional hypothesis. So if your hypothesis is, I'm a failure, and then all these self-sabotagey things come out, there's a certain satisfaction at the end of the day saying, hey, look, I'm a failure. You know, like there's this almost very upside down kind of win that takes place. And I have to say, self-sabotage in some form plagues over half of the clinical population I work with. And that when they're able to see it, they don't even think of it at the time. But it's almost as though they come to each session presenting the week's failures to me.
Wow.
You know, like a prize, like a confirmation. At least I was right about that, right? And that I sometimes wonder if the self-sabotage, which is then associated with the whatever negative position they're trying to maintain, becomes the one part of their life they can control.
Rule number 7, stop justifying abuse.
What causes somebody, though, to experience the abuse and try to accommodate the abuser rather than experiencing the abuse and moving away?
Right. So that's all comes down to an experience that's unique to any kind of abusive relationship, including a narcissistic relationship, called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance refers to our challenges with keeping two sorts of opposing thoughts in our mind at the same time. And it's a dynamic that is actually far worse for people who have actually been histories of toxic or dysfunctional family systems that they grew up in, or trauma and abuse in those settings. Because what cognitive dissonance is, the most classical example of cognitive dissonance is the one from Aesop's fable, where the fox couldn't get the grapes. And what does the fox say about the grapes? He's jumping and jumping, and the grapes are so big and so juicy and so delicious looking. Fox jumps, fox can't get the grapes. What does the fox then say? No, I bet those grapes were sour anyhow. Right? So the fox makes a justification for not being able to get the grapes, because he's just going to walk away from the beautiful grapes. And to make that more comfortable, he had to tell himself the grapes were sour. Now turn that story in the other direction for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Person's abusing me, person's invalidating, person's manipulating me, person is cruel to me, person is entitled, person's yelling at me. Okay? You're right. All of that should be a sign to leave. So, but this is my partner. This is my family, right? And so especially if you learn to make those justifications as a kid, like you had a parent like this, well, daddy's just angry. Daddy's just tired. Daddy had a hard day at work. Mommy worked so hard. Mommy's been cleaning all day. We justify. Justification lets us stay in the relationship, right? Because the idea of leaving it actually feels too scary, especially again, and this idea of staying in an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship long past its shelf life is called trauma bonding. So people in narcissistically abusive relationships do tend to be trauma bonded, and they have heavy cognitive dissonance. It's very difficult to break away and either say, I am going to stay with this person who I know is abusive, and I'm staying, and I know why I'm staying, because I'm staying for money or kids or whatever, and I'm aware they're going to keep abusing me. That's a much more honest depiction of what's happening. The biggest thing that holds a lot of survivors of narcissistic abuse back is lack of knowledge, which is, the sort of central work I do, which is to educate people on this. So for them to know, most centrally, narcissistic patterns don't change. And number two, their pattern is not your fault. Ooh. And so once you understand those two things, like, oh, this is never going to change. You're telling me when they retire, it's not going to change? Nah. When they get the promotion, it's not going to change? Mm-mm. When we move, it's not going to change? Mm-mm-mm. When the kids grow up? No. Nothing. Never.
Rule number 8, choose your place.
I don't think you can fake narcissism. I think you can fake it for a minute. I often talked about, in fact, in my second book, I did talk about this concept of acquired narcissism or acquired entitlement. And by that I meant, if you're incredibly wealthy, you're very used to the world running on your schedule. Mm-hmm. You have a team of assistants, people picking you up in cars, you don't wait in lines. The world really works smoothly for you, if you will. What can happen is then when they go back to normal life, like they're with their friends or people from their past, they may have that very kind of like quick, entitled, do this, do that. And then someone will say, slow down, sister. I am not your assistant. And they'll often be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they'll be genuinely ashen at that. So I do think that they're not narcissistic per se. They're just sort of used to running through the world in that way. But if they said, oh no, you will do what I said, I am that important, then they're probably narcissistic.
Got it.
So that idea of faking narcissism to get ahead, I don't think most of us can do it. I'll even give you a personal example. I remember way when I finished college, I tried to get into a job in the financial services sector, Wall Street kind of a company. I bombed, forget the first date, the first hour. I'm like, oh, all you guys want to do is make money. They're like, yeah. I'm like, no, that doesn't. What about their feelings? They're like, we don't talk about that here. So literally, I got the job. It was 9:05 a.m. I realized I'd made a mistake. By noon, I realized they were like, all right, we're just going to keep you around doing some clerical work. And I started using their computers to apply for a job in psychology. I mean, I could not sell water in the desert. I'm like, let me give you my water. You're thirsty. It's hot, honey. Course, like, that's me, which is why I'm me and not a a, CEO, never would be. I don't have what it takes. Most of us don't.
Well, you did find exactly what you were supposed to do.
I love what I do, but it doesn't, again, it doesn't pay well. You choose your place in the world, but unfortunately, we do live in a very materialistic and consumerist society. And as long as that's the case, narcissism is going to win because it's about putting yourself first and not really caring as much about others.
Yeah.
And so those are the people who are always going to get to the head of the line. And so can some people turn it on and off? Probably not. Like if you're narcissistic, it sort of bleeds into other areas of your life. And people say, well, then how do they even have friends? Some people cut them a lot of slack. I think that the great narcissist get away with murder catchphrases, that's just how he is. And that's why they get away with a lot. Not to mention that they can sometimes be very generous when it's going to get them what they need. So they may buy everyone big dinners and take everyone on big vacations. So it creates this illusion that there's lots of people around them. I'm not so sure those people will be around just on the basis of how they treat them. It's all the stuff they're making possible for them. It's like narcissists often have big beach houses. They're there for the waves, not for his personality.
Rule number 9, get professional support.
There's many people out there who experience major depressive disorder, which is recurrent major depressive episodes, right? They have an episode, there's a break, they have an episode, there's a break. That some of the episodes, they can sense, there was some sort of trigger, but as time goes on, they'll see that they do kind of come spontaneously. People are trained, if they're in, and they should be in therapy and getting psychiatric support, to start identifying sort of the downswing, that you can start feeling the difference, the change in the prevailing winds, because at that point, it becomes really important to work with a psychiatrist and a therapist about maybe upping the number of sessions, maybe changing the level of medication, so you can be almost responsive to the recurrent major depression. And so I do think you can see a mixed bag. This is me shooting from the hip, I'll be frank with you, because I think that, I don't have the sort of the chapter and verse of the science in front of me, but there's one belief that if a person's having more of what we consider like a biological depression, genetic depression, it's not reactive. You tend to see more of the kind of low energy, high apathy, sleep appetite shifts, almost like more of those vegetative symptoms that seem to speak to more of a neural origin to the depression rather than the cognitive symptoms of depression. I'm no good. Nothing's ever going to go my way. The world is a hostile place. Life is always bad. Why should I even try? And so it has a different flair. Now, with most people with depression, both of those things come together. They have both the vegetative and the cognitive. But I think at the milder levels, you may see a little of low energy, but not as much as you see at the higher, moderate to severe levels, which may speak to sort of different kinds of depressive symptomatology in terms of the way the central nervous system is working.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is avoid depressive talk.
What type of consequences have you seen from people who subconsciously self-sabotage?
The maintenance of negative mood states. So the maintenance of, and when I say negative mood states, also negative mood cognitions, like nothing's ever going to get better. I'm never going to get out of this job. I'm never going to live someplace else. It's a lot of absolute words like nevers and alwayses, which is very much part of depressive talk.
Yes.
So it's a stuckness in where they are in life in terms of, I'm never going to do this, I can't do that, I'm never going to be normal weight, I'm never going to get married, I'm never going to own a home, I'm never going to finish school. It's, again, a lot of it is associated with things that are meaningful goals or aspirations that they are convinced they'll never get to, but yet not a single choice in their life is getting them closer to that place. And when something does get them closer, it's as though it's so uncomfortable that they change course. Not actively. They're not saying, oh, I'm getting too close to marriage, I'm looking to self-sabotage, so let me mess that up. It is after, when you do the deconstruction of it, they'll say, you're absolutely right, that is exactly what I did, but I wasn't aware of it. They weren't aware of it.
Now I've got some special bonus clips that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you just watch a video and you get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of actually following through. That's not good enough, Believe Nation. We need to take some action. But when you watch a video, you get motivated and you create a specific plan of action, that number jumps from 35% to 91% chance of you following through. And when you publicly commit to other people, like leaving a comment down in this video, your number jumps to 95% chance of you actually following through on the plan you set for yourself. So I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Leave it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you.
If you decide to stay, I can get down with that, but you're not staying in this dissonant state. You're not justifying their behavior. You're saying, this person is really unhealthy and awful and bad for me, and I'm staying for very practical reasons because right now I don't want to dismantle this. So that means I need to be in therapy. I need to take care of myself. I need to develop healthier relationships. I need to have realistic expectations. You see what I'm saying? It is like now you're staying, but with your eyes wide open rather than in this rather blind justifying space.
If you want another amazing video highlighting excellence in the Indian community, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.